Hi, I'm Lisa. Welcome back to Biblical Reality Check. Many physicists interpret relativity as describing a four-dimensional space-time structure that contains every event in a single geometric whole. Every choice and every consequence can be viewed as part of the structure. However, our experience of that structure is not fixed at all. It moves, shifts, and evolves. It bends around identity, memory, love, fear, and expectation. This episode is about our experience within this space-time structure. To understand that idea, we first need to revisit what the block universe actually claims. As discussed in a previous video, your entire life is a world line, a single continuous curve stretching from your first moment to your last. Nothing in that curve changes. Nothing is added to the space-time structure. Nothing is removed from it. The block universe is not dynamic. It is not unfolding, and it is not becoming. It is complete. Yet this raises an important question. If the block is fixed, why doesn't life feel fixed? It's because our conscious experience of moving through that structure is constructed by the brain, which predicts, fills in gaps, filters, and edits. In other words, it constructs a story that feels like now. Our perception is not experiencing space-time directly. It is interpreting information through the brain's internal model of reality. Our perception is fluid because the brain is adaptive. The block universe, like a book, is already written, but your experience of the book is dynamic. This is the difference between physics and perception. Since the block is fixed, your entire life, every act, every kindness, and every failure is permanently inscribed into the geometry of space-time. Your legacy is not something you leave behind. It's something that already exists as part of the structure. In this view, you do not create permanence. Your life is already part of the permanent structure. This is the physical meaning of legacy. Your world line remains part of the space-time structure as a geometric fact. Later, we will reinterpret legacy through consciousness, but here in physics, legacy is simply this: your life is a permanent feature of the universe. Yet permanence raises difficult questions. Reality is fixed. Perception is fluid. Physics gives us the structure. Perception gives us the experience. And the two do not match. This mismatch results in an ethical tension within the fixed universe. It causes us to ask ourselves, how does a space-time geometry, where nothing can be added or removed, affect personal choice? What does responsibility mean when the future is not open, but simply not yet experienced? In everyday life, choice feels like selecting one path from many. But some physicists would say this is not the case. In many interpretations of the block universe, there are no branching paths through space-time. There is only the world line that actually exists. So what does choice look like in that scenario? For one thing, your choice does not create a new path, since your world line is a singular path through space-time. In the block universe, choice becomes the location of a particular action on your world line. From inside perception, it may feel like you're deciding, but when viewed from outside the block, it is simply the moment where the choice occurs. The choice remains part of the story, but it is not creating a new timeline. It's a feature of the timeline that already exists. Your choices and actions are part of the block, but they're not random features. They arise from the physical structure of your brain and include your values, your fears, your memories, your identity, your perception, and so on. They are the physical expression of your internal structure. Within this interpretation, responsibility becomes less about alternative possibilities and more about identity. Your world line reveals your internal structure. This is the ethical core of the block universe. You are accountable for what your world line contains because your world line is the physical manifestation of your character. Choice in the block universe looks like, quote, I make this choice, unquote, as opposed to, quote, I could have done otherwise, unquote. In a fixed block, otherwise does not exist. There is only what is. At this point, an obvious question arises. How can one assume responsibility for one's choices and actions if they already exist and there is no alternative choice or action one can take? And that is a reasonable question if one assumes that responsibility is about alternatives rather than authorship. In the block universe, you still make choices and take actions you are solely responsible for because responsibility exists as the physical fact that your world line contains the consequences of your internal structure, not because you could have done otherwise, but because the choice and action is yours and yours alone. When looked at in this way, responsibility is not about freedom from consequences, it's about ownership of them, because your individual choices and actions carry moral weight regardless of whether there were alternatives or not. Ethical questions don't disappear simply because space-time may be fixed. If anything, they become sharper. Every harmful act is permanently inscribed in space-time. Every act of kindness is permanently inscribed. Every moment of integrity, cowardice, generosity, cruelty, all of it is part of the geometry of space-time. Ethics then becomes a study of what your world line contains and not what it might have contained or what it could contain in the future, but what it does contain. Moral weight is the physical permanence of your actions. In a fixed universe, ethics is not about preventing alternate futures. It's about understanding the significance of the one future that already exists. Interestingly, this tension between what is fixed and how we perceive it is not unique to physics. Jesus repeatedly challenged people to reconsider the way they experienced reality. He taught that seeing and understanding were not the same thing. In future episodes, we'll return to that theme. The block universe presents us with a remarkable picture of reality. It suggests that every event in space-time, every success and failure, every act of courage, and every act of selfishness exists as part of a single, complete structure. From the perspective of physics, your life is not something that is gradually becoming real. Your life is already part of the geometry of space-time. And yet, despite everything the block universe explains, a profound mystery remains. Physics can describe the structure. Physics can describe the events. Physics can even describe the brain. But physics does not tell us what it's like to be the one experiencing them. It does not explain why the universe is accompanied by awareness. It doesn't explain why there is an observer moving through experience, one moment at a time. The block universe can describe your world line, but it cannot explain the experiencer of the world line. And that may be the most important question of all. Because regardless of what physics tells us about space-time, every fact we know about reality arrives through consciousness. Every memory, every perception, every thought, and every experience. The structure may be fixed, but our experience of that structure is not. So, before we can fully understand meaning, identity, responsibility, legacy, or even our place within the universe, we need to examine the one thing that makes all those questions possible: consciousness. What is it? Where does it come from? Is it merely a product of the brain, or is it something more fundamental than we have imagined? In our next episode, we'll explore one of the deepest questions in both science and philosophy. Why does consciousness appear as brain activity in space-time? And does that necessarily mean the brain creates consciousness? Because once we begin examining the nature of consciousness itself, we may discover that the greatest mystery in the universe is not the structure of reality, it's the one experiencing it. See you in the next one. Thanks for watching.